tightening, so they're deeply worried.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem because, of course, I mean, within the scientific community, of course, we don't speak with one voice. And it's really, really important, actually, that we do have these different opinions that are looking to help to advise government. That's extremely important. I mean, my personal view is going forward, I think we do need to adopt, in the longer term, more of a flu-like relationship, particularly as we move into the winter. If we do see potentially a surge in cases as we move into the winter, we do need to think now about potentially providing booster vaccines for the vulnerable and the elderly as we move into the winter, not just for COVID actually, but also for flu, because we may see a wave of flu over the winter. And of course, other measures. So trying to put in place support for people to stay at home if they have symptoms, of course, as we move into the winter. There are really sort of basic things that we can do as we move into those higher risk months to try to get the risk as low as possible and adopt more of a flu-like relationship with COVID over the months or years to come.
Do you feel it's inevitable we are going to see restrictions in the winter?
Well, I hope not. And I think it really comes back to really thinking about trying to weigh up risk. I mean, of course, we need to remember that for many years now, the NHS has always been under pressure in the winter months from respiratory viruses. Respiratory viruses do spread much more as we get into the winter. Now, of course, what we absolutely don't want is a situation where we have 1,000 deaths a day, as we saw from COVID at the peak, more than 1,000 deaths a day. That's absolutely something we want to avoid. My hope is with a good vaccination campaign and with sensible measures put in place that we can all take responsibility for, we can avoid those kind of restrictions, because of course restrictions are harmful as well. And so I think hopefully in the longer term we can adopt more of that approach so that we can go back to living our lives as normal.
Would you be happy to do away with your mask or any face covering on the 19th of July?
I mean, it's a difficult one. I mean, I have always worn my face mask since it's been law for the last 12 months because, of course, it is the rules, and of course we do know that the risk is that much lower if we wear a face mask. From a personal perspective, of course, I've always found wearing a face mask quite difficult, but of course I've done it because it is the rules. So I think it's everyone has to make their own decision come the 19th of July of whether they are going to continue wearing it or not.
And many people now, they're hearing this, might just get rid of them now. Do you think they should wait? Exercise caution, I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, all I would say is, it currently is the law that people have to wear face masks in these settings. So I would encourage people to follow the rules that are in place. I think as much as wearing face masks is difficult, I think, I'm sure there are many of us when we go into a shop or when we go into a pub, it's very difficult to wear a face mask, but we have had them in for a long period of time for a reason, because they do reduce risk. So, if they no longer become the law, and of course then it's put into our own responsibilities, people are absolutely within their rights not to do it. But I would say for now, whilst it still is in place, I would encourage people in those settings to keep wearing them for a couple of weeks longer.
I just want to briefly ask you about people getting pinged more and more and they're having to self-isolate. Is it wise to end that and adopt a different strategy?
Yeah, and again, it really comes back to what I was saying before about living with COVID. I think if we are going to think about living with COVID, we need to think about what that relationship with COVID is going to be and whether we go back to sort of ending this kind of isolation strategy. One thing that's been discussed is maybe rather than having a 10-day isolation strategy, we maybe think about repeated lateral flow tests for people who have been pinged and then potentially releasing after a couple of negative tests. But clearly in the longer term, something does need to change so that we don't have long isolation periods for people who've been pinged as part of test and trace.
All right, Dr Mike Tildsley, as always, good to see you. Thanks for your thoughts.
No problem at all.
Now, we've got developing a story to bring you.